Hey everyone, Andrew here. If you haven't heard about it yet, Laravel Sanctum, formerly Laravel Airlock, is an incredibly streamlined, official Laravel package that offers a featherweight authentication system for single-page applications, mobile apps, and token-based APIs. I made a video last year that featured using JWTs to authenticate a Vue app with a Laravel API. While this package might not replace Timon's established JWT auth entirely, if you're going to use Laravel version 7 or higher, it's a much better choice. Installation and setup is a breeze, and in this video, I'll show you how to go from a blank Laravel project to a Vue-powered component making authenticated calls to a backend API. Here we have a brand new, out-of-the-box Laravel project. The first thing that I want to do is set up our API. For this simple demonstration, its purpose is to get back secrets attached to a specific user. We can get started on that by creating our secret model with Artisan. You'll notice throughout this video that I'm using DCR instead of PHP in my command line. My local setup is running through a Docker network, and my alias for Docker Compose Run is set to DCR. If you'd like to learn more about that, I've linked my Laravel Docker video below. I'm also adding in the migration flag so we can create our migration for our secret model at the same time. Let's open up that migration file and create the columns that our model needs. For a secret, I think all that should be required is the user ID to attach it to a user, and then a text column for the actual secret. Looks good. Let's save that and run the migration. Alright, that went through well. Let's open up the model and make some necessary additions. First, protected guarded set to an empty array. I just want to be able to autofill any columns of data for this model. Second, the user relationship. All secrets will belong to a user, and so we'll return this belongs to app user. Now we just need to perform the inverse on our user model. At the bottom, we'll add in a secrets function that returns this, has many, app secret. We're going to need some test data to make sure that our app is working properly. While we could go into the database or Artisan's Tinker shell and create a few dummy models there, I think using a factory would be easier here. Our Laravel app already comes with a factory pre-configured for our user model, so all we need to do is create one for our secrets. Artisan makes this easy with the make factory command, and using our model name with the convention, we'll just call it secret factory. Passing in secret as our model argument also sets up a lot of the boilerplate for us. Let's open up our new factory. Our model has two data points that we need to create when this runs: a user ID, which we'll just set to 1, and a secret. For that, we can use Faker's text element, which will generate a nonsense string. You might be wondering here why we're hard coding a single user in when we could have more than one. Well, I'll show you how to override specific attributes when we're using factories here shortly, so that we can specify other user IDs if needed. Let's save that factory file and open up Artisan Tinker in our terminal. We can create a user by using the global factory method provided by Laravel, passing through our model, and calling make. There's a problem though. That user isn't saved in our database. It was created as an eloquent object, but it wasn't stored persistently. That's kind of intentional though, since factories are usually used during test runs, and you wouldn't want your database populated each time that you ran an automated test. We can fix this by replacing the make method at the end with create. This will generate the user object, and then save it to our database afterwards. Let's go ahead and create two secrets as well, using the secret factory. You'll see our hard-coded user ID as 1 in here. And we'll create another set of two secrets, but this time for the second user we made. This is where I'll show you how to override those defaults that we set in our secret factory. All you have to do is pass in an array of overrides to the create method at the end of the factory call. So we'll override the user ID with a value of 2. We now have 2 randomly generated users with 2 secrets each. The next step that we need to tackle is creating an API endpoint to get our secrets. Opening up our routes API file, we'll remove the default route and comments in there and add in a single new route. Route get secrets, and it'll use secret controller's index method. Let's save this and generate our secret controller using Artisan. Okay, opening it up, we need to add our secret model import statement and index method in here. For now, let's just return all of the secrets in the database. Going over to our browser and navigating to API secrets, we can see our 4 secrets showing up just as expected. I think we're in a good place with our dummy API, so let's start working toward actually being able to authenticate a user into it. This is where Laravel Sanctum comes in. In order to get started, we'll have to require the Laravel Sanctum package using Composer. And then publish the configuration file and migrations using Artisan vendor publish. There's honestly not much in the configuration file, and there's nothing in here that we'll have to adjust for this demonstration. Finally, we'll run artisan migrate to generate those new tables into our database. Okay, going through the documentation, we'll be using Sanctum to authenticate an SPA. According to this, we'll need to add in its middleware to our API group in app, http, kernel. Above the throttle call, we'll add in the ensure frontend requests are stateful class. That seems to be all we need for the API side of things, so it looks like it's time to shift our focus toward the front end. Laravel comes with a default welcome blade template that's displayed on the root path, and we'll copy this to a new file called app.blade.php. In our routes web file, let's change the welcome view to our newly created app view. Going back to our browser, it looks like that's pulling in the correct view. Laravel 7 also introduced a separation of the front end compared to previous versions. If you want a view or authentication boilerplate, you'll have to install a separate package. The documentation lays everything out, and so all we need to do is follow a few steps. First, let's require the Laravel UI package using Composer. And after that's done installing, we can generate user login and registration scaffolding, as well as some boilerplate front-end code using one of a few Artisan commands. Since we're using Vue in this demo, let's run artisan UI vue auth. To finish up this front-end install, we'll have to install the npm dependencies and run a dev build on the bootstrapped assets. Opening up our app.js file, we can see that Vue has been added, as well as an example component. The app.scss file that was generated contains a Google font, as well as the entire Bootstrap framework. Let's navigate back to our app.blade file and get rid of all this hard-coded CSS. We'll add in our style sheet instead, using the mix helper. Our body content can also go, except for this wrapper div, which we'll use for view. This will be our frontend app's mount point. Adding in a call to our app.js script using the mix helper and the provided example component completes our changes. Let's see if everything's working. Yep, on our browser we can see the example component, and it's confirmed using Vue DevTools. Now that we've verified everything has installed and been set up correctly, let's work towards displaying our secrets. We can copy over this example component to one called secret component. We're going to need a login form and a list of the secrets that are returned to us. Our data object will hold a single value for now, the array of secrets to display to the user. In app.js, let's register this component under our example component, and change the component displayed on our app.blade view. Instead of running npm run dev each time that we make a change to the app.js file or any component, we can use npm run watch. This starts a script which watches for any changes made to our SCSS, JavaScript, or Vue files and recompiles everything after saving. Okay, let's start scaffolding out this secret component. The first thing to tackle is the login form. Since we're not submitting this form through the browser, our action is just blank, and instead we'll be using Vue's submit prevent handler, calling a function called handleLogin, which we'll create shortly to send the user's info to our API. This form should be incredibly basic, as all we'll need is an email address, a password, and a button to handle the form submission. Alright, that's looking good. Could be spaced out a little more. Okay, that's better. Let's add in a title as well. Okay, so we can use this form, but nothing's going to happen. The form submission is calling our handleLogin method, but there's nothing there for it to do. Time to add some functionality. First, we'll need to create a way to store the entered in username and password. You can use two separate data points for this, but I prefer using a single object called form data. We can test this out and see that as we change the email and password, our component is storing that in the form data object. If we head back over to the Laravel Sanctum documentation, there's a whole section on getting started with SPA authentication. So let's follow that real quick and see what we need to do. This axios defaults with credentials flag needs to be set to true, so we can head into our bootstrap.js file and add that below the other axios defaults call. Then it looks like before we make any calls to our API, we need to make a GET request to this Sanctum CSRF cookie endpoint, which will set CSRF protection and allow subsequent requests uninterrupted. We'll add this call to our handle login method in our secret component. And just console log the result for now so we can keep track of what's going on. Okay, so if we attempt to sign in, we get a single response back, which was that call to the CSRF cookie endpoint. If we open up our DevTools application tab and navigate to the cookies section, we can see that a couple of cookies were automatically set on our front end. An XSRF token, which handles the CSRF protection, and a Laravel _session token. That second one is super important. After we authenticate into our Laravel app, it's what will determine our authenticated status when we make calls to our app's API. Let's continue with the actual login. Since we use the auth scaffolding when setting up our front end, there's a login route exposed that we can call to automatically attempt our user's login. So after our CSRF protection route has resolved, we'll make a post request to the login route, passing in our form data object that contains the entered in email and password. Just like the last time, we'll console log the response back to determine what's going on. So now, let's try to log in. Oh, we get an error. Because this wasn't one of the users created when we ran our factories. Let's grab an actual email from one of those users in our database. Okay, let's try logging in again. Perfect. No errors and a response back. It might not look like it, but our Laravel session cookie has been updated and allows us to make subsequent calls to our Laravel API as a logged in user. Let's test this out by getting some secrets. We'll add a method called, creatively, getSecrets. It'll call our API endpoint from earlier, API secrets, and return back the response in the console. Let's log in with our dummy user. And we can see our app secrets appearing in the console just as expected. Now might be a good time to actually display those back to our user. Let's create a simple list of secrets using Vue's v-for loop. We'll display back to the user the date that the secret was created, as well as the secret itself. That should be good enough. We're also going to hide the secrets div until there's secrets present, and hide the user login form once those secrets have been retrieved. Finally, we'll replace the component's secrets array with what gets retrieved from the API call. Let's test it out. Beautiful. After logging in successfully, the form is hidden and a list of the app's secrets are shown on the screen. But there's a problem. We don't want to see all of the secrets, right? We just want to see those secrets attached to the user who's logged in. Using Laravel Sanctum and that Laravel session cookie that I mentioned earlier makes this super easy, and I'll show you how. First, let's open up our secret controller again, and we're going to add a request object argument called request to our index method. Then, instead of returning all of the secrets, we can call request user, which will get the authenticated user, and then tack on the secrets relationship to return all of the secret models associated with that user. Save this, and let's test it out one more time. Perfect. We see just those two secrets that were attached to our authenticated user. So what about subsequent API requests? Will you need to make a request to the login endpoint each time? Nope. And that's the beauty of this package. Once those cookies are set after calling the CSRF cookie and login routes, as long as you don't refresh the page, you'll be able to make as many additional calls to the Laravel API as you want. I made this quick button here as an example for that. It calls the getSecrets method directly, and if we log in and open up the console, each time that I click it, it's returning back the secrets data attached to our user. Those calls are automatically adding in the Laravel session cookie in the request headers, and Laravel is decoding that to determine which user is authenticated, if any. Just like what would happen on a traditional PHP web app. This means that you can make subsequent and recurring API calls that require authentication throughout your entire single-page app, as long as you've signed the user in beforehand. Well, so what happens if we get rid of these cookies and try to make a request? It fails with a 500 error, property secrets of non-object. That's because in our secret controller, request user is returning null right now. There's no user authenticated into our app because that Laravel session cookie is invalid or doesn't exist. We can check for this by adding a simple conditional and overriding it with a custom response or message. Let's just say that the user doesn't exist. There we go. Our custom error message displayed if a user isn't signed in. And that's pretty much it. I've only just scratched the surface of what this incredibly powerful yet simple package does, but I hope you've learned something from it. This will help you get started on authenticating an SPA with Laravel using sessions and a stateful front end, but there's plenty more you can do with Sanctum, such as token-based authentication and protecting routes with middleware. Huge thanks to my Patreon subscribers and all of my supporters. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me in the comments or on my Twitter linked below. Thanks for watching.